Chapter 2156, Is this a custom from heaven? Di Fui flicked her hand away and said nonchalantly, I do not care what you say or think. Chun Chao was shocked by his sudden resentment. Di Fui adjusted his robes gently before giving her another look in the eye. A girl should not get too close to her good friend's man, he warned. Chun Chao was taken by surprise. Was this a custom from heaven? Nonetheless, she nodded firmly. All right. Di Fui did not say anything further. Instead, he looked at her, as if trying to tell her to go away. His intense gaze terrified Chun Chao. She touched her nose out of awkwardness and left. She was going for Gu Shijiu this time. The man was good at everything except socializing. He could not join the group, as he was obviously not one of them. Given his attitude, the people were not sure if the man would take advantage of Brother Stone. They wanted to have a chat with Di Fui, but the idea faded when they saw Chun Chao's unfortunate rejection. They dared not take another step closer. Di Fui closed his eyes again to take another quick rest. He started to meditate. After a long day, his spiritual power was reduced by a great amount. He thought that in a short, quiet rest, he would be able to feel his power growing back. However, it was not the case. Every decrease in his level of spiritual power seemed irreversible. His spiritual power was at a new low with no sign of recovery. Earlier, he wanted to open the box in his storage bag to take some dishes out for the group, but he only managed to open a small opening. He could not take the box, so he could only reach out for the small bag that carried the fruits. He could use his spiritual power to open the storage bag forcibly, but he did not want to spend his remaining spiritual power on this unnecessary act. It was already in the evening. The hill was windy with a clear sky. The air was filled with the refreshing scent of the greens around them. The surroundings were completely different from the valley that was constantly shielded under a dark, gray layer of haze, but there was one thing in common: there was no spiritual power in the air at all. Di Fui had been to the underworld, which was said to have the worst condition out of all existing worlds. It was known to be a place with a scarce amount of spiritual power. As long as he meditated with special techniques, he could still source a large supply of spiritual power from the surroundings to fill in the gaps in his body. However, there was no spiritual power at all in his current location. Logically speaking, all the lives here, including the plants, had a spirit. As long as there were spirits, there would be spiritual power. This was a matter of fact that even God could not alter. In the valley, there was an explanation for the lack of spiritual power. But why would the outside world be just the same? Was there any special channel to absorb the spiritual power of this particular world? Was there any problem with his meditation? He took at the Ken leader who was sitting on a rock and trying to meditate as well. The way he did it was a little different from him. He pointed a finger at the sky, and another to the earth. He did not sit with his legs crossed, instead, he sat with his feet facing each other. After a short while, his fingers started to tremble. Soon, he opened his eyes, only to be surprised by Di Fui's presence. Di Fui was staring at him from the top of another rock, not too far away. Mr. Di, he greeted while trying to stand up. Have you extracted any spiritual power? Di Fui asked frankly. The clan leader hesitated a little and shook his head in disappointment. There is no spiritual power here. His face was grave as he told Di Fui. Something is not right. There used to be spiritual power here. Yes, I did take a short rest here on the hill back in the days. There used to be an abundance of spiritual power, unlike now. Did the red fog absorb all of the spiritual power here because the place is too close to the Forbidden Land? The clan leader tried to find the best explanation. Chapter 2157, Finally, you want to talk to me? Di Fui squinted at the clan leader's comment. He thought that this matter was not that simple. What identity did you have before you entered the valley and got trapped? The old patriarch was shocked. He did not expect Di Fui to ask this question. Huh? Di Fui quietly stared at him and did not speak. The old patriarch was nervous under Di Fui's intense gaze. He sighed. Why did you ask this question? I need to know the truth. He knew too little about this world, so he needed to increase his knowledge. The old patriarch was the only one who survived among the trapped people. Although he looked like everyone else, Di Fui had sharp eyes that could identify that he was different from the others. For example, other people were rougher, and the way they talked was more direct merely because they did have an adequate education. The old patriarch's speech was somewhat literary, and his style of work also had a demeanor of a nobleman. Obviously, he had been well educated. Di Fui's inquiry clearly evoked the memories of the old patriarch. He sighed and said, Actually, there is nothing to hide. I was once the son of the owner of Luohua City. During the time, I came here for hunting with a few friends and some family servants. However, I didn't expect that. He did not expect to be trapped and forced to be rooted in this place. Fortunately, when they came hunting, they brought a lot of female servants. After being trapped, many of them were married and had kids. Gradually, they developed into a village. However, the maids they brought were not highly educated and did not even know how to read. This carried on to the next generation. Most of them were trained to hunt as their primary job. As a result, after they had developed for centuries, their descendants had lived like the primitive. Di Fui sized him up. What level of spiritual power had you achieved before you were trapped? Level 6. The old patriarch sighed. He was considered a master in the past, and that was the reason he could become the clan leader. How much spiritual power do you have now? Nothing at all. Did the aristocrats in the Luohua city often come to this mountain to hunt? Yes, in the past, this place was full of majestic beings. Everyone hunted majestic beings and used it for their own use. This mountain was the hunting grounds of the noblemen. Di Fui wandered around this place. The old patriarch looked at him and did not know what he was looking for. Gu Shijio also studied the terrain nearby, to ensure that no dangerous beasts were lurking. When she saw Di Fui wandering around, she paused and went over. What are you looking for? Why aren't you resting? Di Fui looked at her quietly for a moment. Finally you want to talk to me. Gu Shijio was speechless. Because of the death of the 8 elders, she felt guilty in her heart. She was upset with Di Fui because she felt that he was the reason that they decided to sacrifice themselves. Although rationally she understood that she should not blame Di Fui, emotionally, she felt a bit irritated and did not want to talk to him. Besides, she also knew that Di Fui was exhausted and needed to rest, so, she ran away and arranged other things. Chapter 2158, Was she treating him like a child? Gu Shijio thought that her coldness was just a small matter and that Di Fui might not be able to sense it. However, she did not expect this person to be extraordinarily sensitive. And, also a bit arrogant. It made Gu Shijio dumbfounded. I have always wanted to talk to you, I just thought that you should rest more and meditate. You cared about me? Of course. Gu Shijio had taken the time to calm down and clear up her mind, so the grievances in her heart had almost disappeared. Di Fui raised his hand and held her hand to pull her closer to his side. Can you stay with me when I rest? Gu Shijio looked at his slightly pale face. She felt somewhat distressed but also thought that it was rather humorous. Do you actually need me to accompany you to rest? Are you a kid? Di Fui replied, Well, then I will go and rest alone, you can go ahead with your things. He let go of her hand, turned and left. Gu Shijio was speechless. She was just joking, but she felt like she had stepped on his tail. She looked at his back and could tell from his body language that he was disappointed. She went forward and spoke, Okay, I will accompany you to rest. She comfortably grabbed his hand and patted it. Don't be angry, okay? Di Fui was speechless. Was this girl treating him like a kid? He glanced at her from the side and felt as though she was comforting her wife. It seemed like she had been deep-rooted as a man. Di Fui's eyes flashed slightly as he circled her waist with one of his arms to hug her. Let's go. The old patriarch looked at the Di Fui with a confused look. He thought that after Di Fui had questioned him, that he would be able to find out something and discuss it with him. He certainly did not expect Di Fui to leave with his fiancée. He watched Di Fui and Gu Shizhou rest on a big rock. The man then pulled her to lean on his shoulder. Come and rest. Look at your tired little face. Let them do the guarding. Even if you are the leader, you don't have to do everything. Gu Shizhou was really tired. At this moment, when she leaned on his shoulder, she felt warm and comfortable. However, she still wondered, I thought that you would take out a bed to rest. Di Fui was stunned, and then he raised his hand to pat her hair. Stupid, we should not enjoy such luxury in front of so many people. Otherwise, people would think that you are just showing off. If you think that the rock is too hard, you can sit on my lap and let me hug you. Gu Shizhou was speechless for a moment. Later, she firmly refused. No, leaning on each other will do. Therefore, they both leaned on each other to rest. The old patriarch could not help but watch the couple. He sat down somewhere nearby and frowned. He wanted to go over and talk to Di Fui, but he did not want to disturb the pair of lovebirds. Gu Shizhou was really tired. She had forced herself to arrange all the events of the day. At this moment, when she leaned on Di Fui and ate a fruit he gave, she fell asleep quickly without knowing it. After eating and drinking, the rest of the people also rested, except for those who were on duty to guard the place. Suddenly, the hillside went quiet. About an hour later, the old patriarch was eager to head to the city. He stood up and wanted to wake the people up to continue the journey. Di Fui suddenly opened his eyes and waved at him. Consequently, the old patriarch walked over. The few words that Di Fui subsequently said made the old patriarch's heart almost sink into the abyss. Chapter 2159, I am going with you. The outside world is not a happy land, it has changed. This place is the buffer zone, so let everyone rest more. We can depart again at dawn. The old patriarch was stunned for a moment. How? How do you know? Di Fui calmly said, since this mountain was a place where the nobles have been hunting, there must be people who often maintain it. Besides, you were the son of the owner of Luohua City. If you suddenly disappeared, the city owner would definitely send people to come and find you. Even if they can't enter into the red fog area, they should at least search around this hillside. However, I just looked around, and there were only traces of human activities 100 years ago. No one has come to this place for around 100 years. There are only two possibilities for this kind of situation. The first is that drastic external changes have made this place worse than the red fog blockade area, and human beings have become extinct. Second, human beings have not gone extinct, but their range of activities has not been able to reach here. His analysis was reasonable, and the old patriarch could not counter it. Di Fui was right. This place used to be quite prosperous. There was a bustling station built by Luohua City along the way. There were often young noblemen who came here to hunt, so there should be signs of human activity in this place. In the past, when they were trapped, they had hoped that the city owners would send people to rescue them. Unfortunately, nothing happened. He thought that those who were sent were blocked by the red fog and could not enter the valley. He never expected that they could not even reach this hillside. It seemed that the outside world was not as beautiful as they thought, and it had changed dramatically. What would be the significant changes? The old patriarch's fists clenched as he looked at Di Fui. What can we do now? Everyone is tired. You all can take a break here first. I will go out and take a look. I will go to Luohua City first, and we can decide later. I am going with you. Gu Shizhou, who had been leaning on Di Fui, suddenly opened her eyes. It seemed like she was awake for some time. Di Fui refused. No, I am just going to explore. You stay here and take care of the villagers. Since the situation is unknown, there might be an attack during this period. The old patriarch also said, Shizhou, Mr. D is right. You should stay here to deal with any unexpected events. Gu Shijiu stood up. There will be nothing unexpected here. I have already searched the area, and there has been no trace of any beast activity in recent times. Of course, there are no signs of human activity too. This place should be safe for the time being. It is enough to have Tai Dan and the rest to stay. On the contrary, the outside world could be hazardous. If he went out alone, he might be in danger. Thus, it would be better for me to go together with him. At a crucial time, she could use her teleportation technique to save his life. Di Fui could not help but look at her. He did not expect her to have checked the surroundings so thoroughly when she appeared to be leisurely taking a stroll earlier. Although she lost her memory and martial arts ability, her sixth sense was still extremely sensitive, and her style of work had not changed much. Gu Shijiu felt very fortunate that they did not bring the whole team together in this period, or else they would all be dead. The sky was covered with thick clouds. Flowers, grass, and trees had grown everywhere, and the beasts were rampant. The weeds were long and tall, and the shrubs that used to be at the height of their waists had now grown into towering trees here. The trees here were strange. All the branches had expanded toward the direction of the sky. Chapter 2160, Cooperation. Di Fui saw a willow which had branches that were like the hair of a woman being blown up by the wind. However, the scenery on the ground was not covered by the trees. If one looked up, they could still see the sky, stars, and moon. The two finally found the so-called bustling station that they looked for. The road there was made of stone. It was flat and firm, and it could definitely carry carriages on it. However, it had now been filled with thorns and weeds, and the whole place was hidden in the mountains and jungle. Gu Shijiu had to pull out a lot of grass before she was able to see the road. Of course, in the process of pulling, they also encountered 3 leopards, 2 tigers, and 1 bear. These animals were extremely fierce, but they were still not strong enough to defeat Di Fui and Gu Shijiu. The two of them could easily take the animals down. Di Fui dragged a tiger over to check it. His lips pressed together into a thin line. What's wrong? Gu Shijiu went close to him. Di Fui took a deep breath. There is no spiritual power in them. Should they have it? Di Fui answered, everything is spiritual. They are supposed to have spiritual power. Gu Shijiu frowned. I heard from the old patriarch that this world has spiritual power. I always thought that the outside world would have it. Is there something that sucked all the spiritual power of the world? Di Fui pondered for a while and said, there is always a natural spiritual power generated by the sky and the earth. If the power was being sucked out, it could still be regenerated. However, I still can't sense it until now. I guess there must be some mechanism or wizardry barrier that is constantly draining the spiritual power away. While both of them were talking, a big python emerged and rushed toward them. The big eyes of the python were both red like lanterns. It rushed fiercely to both of them as if it had a deep hatred toward the two. Di Fui frowned as he pulled Gu Shijiu behind him. He whispered, don't take its life yet. Okay. Gu Shijiu also pulled out her sword from the sheath. Although the big python was fierce, it was also not equal to these two people. After a while, the body of the big python had already been cut by both of them. It was 7 or 8 feet long, and the giant python was at least 500 years old. It should be a semi-demon. By right, this kind of python should already be very intellectual. It should be smart enough to realize that it was not the opponent of Gu Shijiu and Di Fui. A regular python would have fled. However, this python entangled with them indefinitely and had no plan to run away. When Di Fui felt that the timing was almost right, he ended the python's life with his sword. Both of them were a little breathless, but after a quick break Di Fui asked Gu Shijiu, what can you see? Gu Shijiu said, these beasts are very reckless and irrational. They attack anyone and will not stop until they are dead. Yes, they are very reckless. I had observed them just now. The two shared their opinions while sitting on a branch. Gu Shijiu looked up at the round moon in the sky. I don't know if they are all like this during the day and night, or only at night. I somehow feel that this moon is a bit strange. Was the moon strange? Di Fui also looked at the moon. The moon was as big as a disc and was golden. There was a cloud floating around it. It was a very typical night under the moonlight. He could not see any strange. Suddenly, he thought of something, and his fingers that were holding his sword were tightened. Chapter 2161, Cooperation, 2, Di Fui finally realized what went wrong. The night they came out, the moon was not round. However, it was now a full moon. A full moon could make animals excited and reckless. Even some people from the monster kingdom could not get rid of this kind of curse. For example, the werewolf family could generally keep their human appearance under normal circumstances. However, when it was a full moon, they could easily be violent and bloodthirsty and ultimately turn into wolves. The man turned his head and asked Gu Shijiu, "Is there supposed to be a full moon today?" Gu Shijiu shook her head. "No. Today is the first day of the lunar calendar, it is not supposed to be a full moon." Did the old patriarch mention before that the timing outside is different? No, the old patriarch actually brought an hourglass with him when he came out to hunt and got trapped. He made sure that the time was synchronized with the outside world. Di Fui frowned slightly. He had some knowledge about the Shura world and knew that the moon worked the same as the ordinary world. It seems that this moon has a problem. Gu Shijiu remained silent. It was still alright if other things went wrong. How does one fix the moon? The moon may not be the real reason. Perhaps there is some kind of power that changed the magnetic field of the Shura world. We can investigate it after we get out. Di Fui shook his head. Do not worry, you have me for everything. Gu Shijiu felt warm in her heart and let out a sigh of relief. I am thinking about what we should do next. The beasts we encountered are not particularly powerful, maybe the situation outside is not as bad as we thought, and Luohua City still exists. Di Fui looked around his surrounding. The tree they stood on was the highest in the vicinity, and they could see miles ahead. He could see that deep in the woods, there were all kinds of beasts that emerged from time to time. Once these beasts came together, it was a bloody battle. The moon makes them excited. Look at their eyes. They are blood red. Fortunately, they are much weaker than the fierce beasts in the valley. One person can deal with 2 or 3 beasts here individually. What I worry is if they attack in groups. Gu Zijius analyzed. Don't worry, these fierce beasts are too affected by the moon. They will have no energy during the day. Most of them will find a place to rest. Even if a few beasts attack, we can deal with it. However, I'm concerned that something else will happen. Di Fui suddenly noticed that Gu Shijiu was quiet. She felt an inauspicious breeze come out from the ground, and the air suddenly became quiet. The weather was hot, so Gu Shijiu had already sweated, but when the inauspicious breeze turned up, she had a shudder, and felt that the temperature around seemed to have dropped by a few degrees. Gu Shijiu could tell that something bad was about to happen. She held her breath, and subconsciously looked at the direction in which the mist began to appear. There was a bloody red object looming in the fog. As it was still rather far away and blocked by fog, Gu Shijiu could not see the appearance of the bloody red object. She was only instinctively aware of the danger. Yaha! The bloody red object suddenly screamed. The sound was sharp with a strange pitch. It shook their eardrums vigorously. Gu Zijius goosebumps were coming out. Di Fui lifted his sleeves to cover her ears. Chapter 2162, Cooperation, 3. However, the other beasts in the forest were not so lucky. After the screaming, these beasts quickly stood still. They were shivering, but they did not dare to run. The blood-red object inside the mist flew toward the beasts in an instant. Only the screams of countless beasts were heard in the mist. After the mist disappeared, there were only skeletons left in the place where the beasts were standing. Gu Zijius' facial expression changed. What was this? It was too powerful. She suddenly felt that Di Fui's body grew stiff as well, and he seemed to be a little bit nervous. She turned her head slightly and saw that Di Fui was staring in one direction. There was a flash of light at the bottom of his eyes. Was he excited? What is that? Do you recognize that thing? Di Fui shook his head. I don't. What are you excited about? There is spiritual power in this object. Can you wait here? I will go and take it down. Di Fui leaped from the tree and flew toward the mist like an arrow. In just a moment, Gu Shijiu found that Di Fui and the bloody red object had been entangled together. Gu Shijiu bit her lips and teleported to the place. However, she kept a distance between the two of them. She landed at a location nearby to watch them fighting, and in case if Di Fui was defeated, she could go forward and take over. At the very worst, she could teleport both of them to safety. As she was close to the scene, she could finally see the appearance of that beast clearly. Her heart jumped slightly. What species was this? This beast looked like a pig, but it was not a pig. Its body was round and fat like a pig, it had spots on it like a leopard. It even had the head of a dragon and a pair of small shredded wings. Every time its wings flapped, there was a layer of mist around it. The mist was not white, but light blue. Whenever the mist touched something, it would dry up and die. This mist was undoubtedly poisonous. Gu Shijiu was worried that Di Fui might be in grave danger, so her eyes had never moved away from him. Perhaps Di Fui had taken anti-poison pills before approaching it, he did not seem to be afraid of the poison. He was flying around the bloody red monster. Under the moonlight, his large robe fluttered like a wave, and with his handsome face, every single move he made looked graceful. Even though he looked elegant, his attacks were powerful and forced the bloody red monster to retreat. Gu Shijiu breathed a sigh of relief. By looking at this situation, he could settle this beast without her. The battle was intense. It made Gu Shijiu felt dizzy, so she retreated to a few trees behind to avoid being affected by the momentum created from the battlefield. After a quarter of an hour, Gu Shijiu frowned slightly. The skin of this monster was too thick. The sword in Di Fui's hand had cut on the monster's body more than 10 times, but there was no wound at all. This kind of creature should have a weak point. Gu Shijiu pondered in her heart, and her eyes were fixed on the monster instead. After a moment, she yelled, "Try to stab it in its left eye." This monster allowed Di Fui to stab it at anywhere on its body, but when Di Fui was about to stab its left eye, it would subconsciously block it. Unfortunately, Gu Zijia's scream had attracted the monster's attention. The monster screeched and rushed toward Gu Shijiu. Even though it was fast, Gu Shijiu had her teleportation to protect her. The monster thought that it had caught the girl with its claw, but all it could find was a lot of leaves. Chapter 2163, Cooperation, 4, a pair of eyes turned around to look for the fragrant little girl. Pig, I am here. The monster turned its head and saw Gu Shijiu standing in another leafy tree with a smile. Yeah, the monster attacked again. When its claw was going to tear Gu Shijiu apart, it did not expect that a cold light would shine into its eyes. Pooh! The cold light hit the monster's left eye, and blood gushed out of the monster like a waterfall. The monster crashed on the ground. After its body twitched a few times, it finally stopped moving. Gu Zijius was elated by their success. Our cooperation is quite good, right? She was going to go down and check on her trophy. Di Fui pulled her back. Wait! What was he waiting for? Gu Shijiu wondered, but she soon understood. Di Fui plucked off a twig and threw it down at the monster. The monster that was apparently dead suddenly jumped up and bit the twig. The twig was instantly crushed into powder. Gu Shijiu was shocked. This thing actually knows how to pretend to be dead. The monster then crashed to the ground again. Di Fui finally spoke, it was not pretending to be dead. He brought Gu Shijiu down the tree. At this point, Gu Shijiu witnessed Di Fui familiarly cut off the head of the monster and remove a red crystal from its head. The red crystal was like a red sun reflecting a red flame around it. From this red crystal, Di Fui finally felt the long-lost spiritual power that was hidden from this land. This crystal actually contained a lot of spiritual power, so Di Fui was relieved. He put the crystal on his palm, and then pulled Gu Zijia's palm over. Come, let us absorb it together. This red crystal contained a lot of spiritual power, and Di Fui estimated that after the absorption, he could restore the spiritual power that he had consumed today. Even though it would not be able to restore him to his original level, at least he would be able to open his storage space again. Gu Zijia's eyes flashed slightly. Suddenly, she withdrew her hand. No, you absorb it. Di Fui was shocked and looked at her. The spiritual power on this red crystal is extremely pure. I have tried it, and there is no evil influence. You can absorb it by using the method I have taught you. There will not be any side effects. Gu Shizhou shook her head and looked at him. No, you have used up a lot of spiritual power today, and you can't even open your storage space. You should restore your energy from this red crystal. Di Fui remained silent. He did not expect her to be so observant. She was still very sharp. He smiled, held her hand, and said in a firm voice, Shizhou, we can't get out of this disaster if everyone only relies on me. You need to be stronger too. Come on, absorb it with me, this was a fair point. Hence, Gu Shizhou would not refuse anymore. She absorbed the spiritual power from the red crystal together with Di Fui. After half an hour, the bloody red crystal became gray, and the gloss on the stone had disappeared. Gu Shizhou and Di Fui opened their eyes at the same time. Di Fui looked at her red cheeks and asked, how do you feel? Gu Shizhou took a breath and answered in one word, great. She could feel the spiritual power circulating in her body. Her veins were revitalized, and her body was also lighter by a few pounds. Chapter 2164, Baby, you can go now. She smiled and gently stretched out her fingers. A flame was issued from her hand and burnt the branches on the ground. It was really magical. It was more convenient than using charcoal. Di Fui quickly grabbed her hand. It is not easy to get spiritual power. Don't waste it. Gu Zijia's eyes fell on the dead monster. I didn't expect this thing to have spiritual power. Let's hunt a few more. If we look hard enough, perhaps we can even find the nest of the monster. Di Fui could not help but laugh. This beast looks like a rare one. I bet that there won't be another beast of this kind in a 20-mile radius. Well, Gu Shizhou still believed in Di Fui. She grabbed his hand and said, if that's the case, let's go to Luohua City. When she finished her sentence, she had teleported together with him. Since the old patriarch had already told them the direction in advance, coupled with the fact that Gu Shizhou was also very good with directions, she was not afraid to travel quickly. When she did not have any spiritual power, she could only teleport 2 or 3 miles together with Di Fui. However, with spiritual power, her physical fitness had improved significantly, so she was able to teleport 10 miles at once. Of course, the two of them still encountered fierce beasts along the way. If she could avoid them, she would definitely stay away. Otherwise, they would just kill them. There was another benefit of teleportation, which is that she could travel in a straight line. This allowed them to move faster. After 4 consecutive teleports, she had taken both of them entirely out of the mountainous area. Gu Shizhou looked around, and her heart sank. The place where she was standing should be the main road. However, it was also covered by bushes of wild grass. It was similar to the situation in the mountains. There was no trace of human activity. This place was about 40 miles away from the so-called Luohua City. If Luohua City still existed, this place should not be abandoned. Gu Shizhou studied her surroundings and realized that the trees on both sides were raging like the primeval forest, and all the branches were also extended to the sky, like the inverted mop. It was hardly different from the mountain. In fact, all the animals were close to a state of madness as well. From time to time, they could hear the raging sound of beasts and the sounds of chewing teeth. Fui, do you think Luohua City still exists? Gu Shizhou felt a sense of hopelessness. Di Fui was also studying his surrounding. He had just taken down a wild wolf with a big sturdy knife. He looked at it and sighed a little. I don't know if Luohua City still exists, but there are still other people in the world, and they are living in the city. Gu Shizhou looked at the knife in his hand. Her heart moved a little. The style of his knife was quite similar to the collection of the old patriarch. However, the old patriarch's knife had been used for more than 100 years and very seriously worn out. This knife seemed to be entirely new, and the blade was still extremely sharp. The old patriarch said that the knives in this world were made with bronze and forged by a little bit of iron. If they had not been used, the blade would have a layer of copper rust on the surface. The longer the idle time, the more rust there would be. Chapter 2165, Baby, you can go now, too. The knife in Di Fui's hand was a little bit rusty. Evidently, this knife had been abandoned for only a brief period. Since Di Fui found it on the ground, there must be a city in this world. After they made this presumption, Gu Shizhou breathed a sigh of relief, and she was certainly more motivated. She once again grabbed Di Fui's hand and said, "What are we waiting for? Let's go to Luohua City." Unexpectedly, Gu Shizhou and Di Fui had fallen into a trap. There was a tiger in the trap as well, so when Gu Shizhou and Di Fui landed, they stepped on the back of the tiger. The tiger growled and turned its head. It wanted to bite the two of them. Di Fui was quick to react. However, when he wanted to knock the tiger out cold, he suddenly felt a chill in the air, and an inauspicious influence emerged from the ground. This was a very familiar feeling. Di Fui pulled Gu Shizhou close to him. The spiritual pig appears again. When he finished his sentence, a bloodied pig monster appeared again. All of a sudden, the net was heading for a crash on the ground. When it came to a critical time, Gu Zijia's teleportation technique was still the best. Before the big net landed, she had teleported away together with Di Fui and landed on a tree nearby. They looked down again and found that the pig and the tiger were in the middle of the big net. Catch it! Grab it! The Chinese alligator is caught. We are finally safe. We have caught it. We still need to kill it and get the spiritual crystal. Behind a big tree, 12 people emerged. These people dressed alike. All of them dressed in dark blue robes and were apparently from the same apprenticeship. There were 10 men and 2 women. They all wielded the same weapons. It was clear that these people practiced martial arts. The way they walked was very light but with strength. When they came out from their hiding places, they were very agile. Gu Zijia's eyes fell on the weapons of these people. They were carrying sharp bronze swords that were the same as the one in Di Fui's hand. These people also saw Gu Shizhou and Di Fui. However, they were occupied with more urgent matters. They spent all the energy on the pigs that were inside the net. Only one of them rapidly glanced at Di Fui and Gu Shizhou on the tree. He shouted, "We found this female pig dragon. You should not steal from us." Di Fui was gently leaning on the big tree. He smiled and responded, "You do not have to worry. We are not going to steal from you." The man was dazzled by his smile and stared at him for a while. However, he quickly shifted his attention elsewhere because the female pig dragon that was caught had already gone crazy. This Chinese alligator was apparently smaller than the one that Di Fui killed, but it was still very fierce. The tiger that was in the same net had been eaten, and only its skeleton was left behind. The creature used its teeth to bite the net. It ejected poisonous liquid to erode the net too and also used its claw to tear it. However, this was obviously a special net. The materials were unusually strong. Chapter 2166, Baby, you can go now. 3. The Chinese alligator tossed and turned a few times but still did not get rid of the net. Of course, the 8 men who had been pulling the net were also very exhausted. They were being dragged around the place by the Chinese alligator. At the same time, the other 4 continued to stab the Chinese alligator with their swords whenever they had the opportunity. The 12 of them cooperated well, were definitely well trained. Gu Shizhou looked down for a moment and then turned to ask Di Fui, "Are we not helping them?" It was rare to see other humans, so she was curious about them. The Chinese alligator had severely drained the 12 of them, so she could not bear to see it and wanted to help. Di Fui shook his head slightly. "No, let us observe first." It was difficult to read people's hearts. Those people were very alarmed by their presence. If they went down to help now, it could make the situation worse for everyone. His observation was very sharp, and in a matter of time, he could see that the 12 people could not hold the creature down. After an hour, they were exhausted, but they did not leave any wound on the pig. Gu Shizhou had kindly hinted to them about the left eye of the pig, but they could not stab it even though they had fought very hard. These 12 people were considered as masters. They could easily cut down a huge tree. However, this Chinese alligator's skin was thicker than a trunk. Furthermore, it continued to roll on the ground crazily, which made life very difficult for the 8 people trying to hold the net together. The palms of the 8 people had been bleeding. The Chinese alligator was getting frustrated. Suddenly, it screeched in a very high pitch, and its 2 little wings flapped. It was so powerful that it carried the 8 people who were pulling the net up into the sky. These people were shocked. The other 4 people quickly ceased their attacks on the creature and started to help the 8 men. The assistance of the 4 men managed to help bring the creature down to the ground again. However, it rolled over and dragged the 12 people down with it. One of the women was weak, so her hand slipped, and the net came out of her palm. The pig was extremely intelligent. It immediately turned toward this person and rushed over to her. That woman screamed as she saw a big mouth headed toward her. The sharp teeth of the beast were just right in front of her, and she subconsciously closed her eyes. Just as she expected her head to be bitten, there was a sudden rush of wind around her. The woman felt as though she was flying for a moment, and then she landed on the ground. Stand properly. She subconsciously opened her eyes and found herself standing on a tree. Beside her was a woman in a light blue dress. The facial features of the woman beside her were beautiful, but she looked steady. Apparently, she was one of the people watching from the sidelines earlier. She had saved the weak woman. "Thank you." The woman was shocked, and her voice was unsteady. Gu Shizhou could save anyone in a brief second, just as she did for this woman. However, her attention was now focused on the fight below. The woman she saved also looked down, and her facial expression changed. That pig had already got out of the trap. The 11 of them were struggling to get to their feet as the ferocious beast was ready to attack. Its eyes were full of redness, and the hair on its body had stood up. Its wings had also expanded. Chapter 2167, Baby, you can go now, for, apparently, it was angry. Yaha! The pig screeched sharply. It flapped its wings, and red mist rolled up like a hurricane toward those people. Whenever the red mist passed, the trees were dried instantaneously, and they wilted. It was as if a hurricane of the 12th level blew them. The 11 people had just gotten themselves up. They were all stunned by what they had just witnessed. Naturally, they ran away to safety. Nonetheless, this creature had plans to kill the people who had schemed it. Its huge body fluttered toward one of the men. The man had just been blown by the hurricane and did not have time to get up. He knew for sure that he was about to meet his doom. The foot of this pig was the size of a dustpan. If its claw managed to hit him, he was going to be torn into pieces. This person wanted to dodge, but it was too late. However, suddenly, there was a flash of light in front of him, and he heard a slamming sound. Someone had kicked the pig's hip bone. The huge body of the pig had actually turned due to the impact of this attack. The person in distress took the opportunity to roll to safety. He had a second chance to live, and his heartbeat had quickened. Subconsciously he looked at that figure and found that he was the freeloader he had seen earlier. The man that had a beautiful face. This person actually had the courtesy to ask, "Is this pig still yours?" The man in distress was pale, and his companions were all trying to crawl to safety. They did not even dare to say they wanted to hunt the pig. They probably expected to die here. This pig is yours. Please settle it quickly. The distressed man was the head of the gang and immediately made the most fitting choice. The rest also shouted, "We don't want it. You can have it." Help. Di Fui smiled. He turned back and gestured to Gu Shizhou. Baby, you can go now. Gu Shizhou stumbled and almost fell down from the tree. She squinted at Di Fui. This guy had always called her using different names, Shizhou, little Shizhou, and this time, he even called her as his baby. Strangely, this name was very nauseating. Her heart was actually trembling as she felt an inexplicable pain. Of course, this pain lasted only a moment, and her attention was redirected to the pig. Help! The pig almost attacked another woman from the back. She was so scared and was heard screaming. Gu Shizhou teleported to her side and pulled her up the tree. Before the woman was conscious, Gu Shizhou had teleported once again. This time, she was directly in front of the pig. The sword in her palm was pointed at the pig. Pig, your opponent is me. The girl in the light blue dress was flying around the Chinese alligator that had abused them miserably. In just a few minutes, the sword in the woman's palm had been inserted into the left eye of the pig. The pig screamed loudly and finally fell to the ground. Everyone was stunned. They had tried very hard to catch one themselves but were never successful. However, it was quickly killed by a woman who seemed to be weaker than them. Countless pairs of eyes fell on Gu Shizhou, and everyone opened their mouths slightly but could not speak. Chapter 2168, You Make the Call. Gu Shizhou was very smart. She had seen how Di Fui had retrieved the crystal from the creature earlier. Therefore, after cutting the pig's head open, a bright red crystal was taken out. The 12 pairs of eyes were staring at the red crystal. The group had really wanted this prized possession. Di Fui also glanced at the red crystal, which was much smaller than the one he had just consumed earlier. If he had to assess based on the outlook, the one he just consumed was a first-class product, and this one was a third-class product. Gu Shizhou slid the crystal in her palm and looked at Di Fui. She asked him, "What is your plan?" Di Fui smiled. "It is retrieved by you. You make the call." Gu Shizhou looked at the 12 people again. They all looked at the red crystal, and the eyes were full of envy. "What do you all think?" Gu Shizhou looked around at everyone. The 12 people looked at each other. The head of the gang was pale and let out a chuckle. "It's yours. Brother, what if we cannot catch a second pig?" A woman opened her mouth. "We can't enter the city, this time, we are dead." Another woman spoke in desperation. We can hunt again. We will find a second one." The head of the gang tried to lift the confidence of the group, but the rest could not feel it. "Our time is running out, there is only 1 day left. Our Chinkuan net is also broken. What do we use to hunt it? It's over. We are going to die. The Zhuri clan is going to be extinct." These 12 people were clearly desperate. They did not even have enough strength to sit up. "I can give you this red crystal." A crisp voice was heard. This sentence immediately brought a sense of hope to the crowd. The head of the clan trembled. What? What? "I can give you this red crystal, but you have to answer a few questions. Once you answer properly, this red crystal is yours." Gu Shizhou opened her mouth again, and the red crystal in her palm spun. The 12 people naturally agreed to this exchange. Therefore, Gu Shizhou knew the following from their answers. Luohua City still existed, and it was rather developed. 123 years ago, the sky was gloomy, and a species had mutated, the flowers and trees were clearly affected and grew out of control. All the branches were extended to the sky. Some extremely ferocious monsters appeared in this world. These monsters mainly consumed other species in the Shura world as their food. The pigs that appeared were one of the monsters. The spiritual power between heaven and earth was getting lesser and lesser and finally dissipated completely. What was even more bizarre was that the moon in the sky was always round. There was no such thing as a full or non-full moon. The ordinary animals on the ground went crazy every night. They were much milder during the day, and most of them were hiding in cooler places to rest. There were still many practitioners in this Shura world. As they could not get the spiritual power that was needed for cultivation, many practitioners in different clans had become ordinary people. They had died of illnesses and old age. In addition to the ravages of these monsters, a lot of villages and towns had been destroyed, and many clans were getting extinct. Later, they did not know who actually found out that those extremely fierce monsters had a spiritual crystal which could replenish spiritual power. Therefore, the clans started to hunt these monsters. Chapter 2169, they received a second chance. The creature was extremely ferocious, and a special weapon was required to hunt it down. Many lives had been taken before one could even be caught. Furthermore, with such a barren environment, people could no longer plant crops as the weeds would have prevented it. Thus, there was completely no grains available, and the villagers could only struggle to survive by hunting for their food. To make matters worse, there was a blood rainfall once every 10 days in this realm. The rain was highly corrosive to the extent it could destroy normal houses and even some of the caves. Only those houses protected by wizardry barriers were protected. Nonetheless, that was not their only threat. There was a flood of countless monstrous blood bats that sucked the blood from any living things in just a blink of an eye. The Juiri clan was once a relatively good clan, however, there were only 12 members left since the misfortune. It was only when they gave shelter to a vagrant that they found out that not all the cities have waned. 9 new cities were created in recent years, and all of the people there were living normal lives. Such cities were considered a paradise to the people who suffered every day. Therefore, the members of the Juiri clan decided to move to Luohua City, which was nearest to their clan. Their clan was about 600 miles away from Luohua City, and 12 of them made it after 6 days of travel. Unfortunately, they found out that they were required to pay spiritual stones to enter the city. The only other acceptable scenario was if they possessed a special ability. Otherwise, there was no way for them to enter the city. As a result, hunting monsters with spiritual stones in their body was their only option. Fortunately, they had all the necessary equipment, and they knew there was a Chinese alligator around Luohua City since they were very experienced in hunting. After searching for 3 days, they finally found a Chinese alligator. Unfortunately, all of them almost died. Nevertheless, since Gu Shizhou got all the information she wanted, she lifted her hand and tossed the spiritual stone to the leader. "Here you go." The leader could not believe it when he got the stone. After all, the information Gu Shizhou wanted was not a valuable secret. He even had his doubts about whether or not Gu Shizhou would keep her promise, as he believed that she might not give him the spiritual stone even after he told them the truth. To his surprise, they received a second chance. "Dear benefactor, are you going to Luohua City? Why not follow us? 1 spiritual stone is enough for 20 people to enter the city." Gu Shizhou shook her head and added, "Indeed, we want to enter the city. However, there are 138 of us." She then briefly told them about her tribe. The leader remained silent at first, but then turned around and had a discussion with his junior apprentices. In the end, they proposed, "Benefactors, we are willing to go back to your village and bring all your people to Luohua City." Although the kung fu that the 12 of them possessed were no match for Di Fui and Gu Shizhou, they were much better than the villagers Gu Shizhou wanted to save. Besides that, they had been living outside the forest and knew many ways to protect themselves. It was good insurance for the kids and old folks if they could be their guardians. Hence, Gu Shizhou agreed to the proposal. Chapter 2170, Has it turned into a fairy? There would be a blood rainfall at midnight tomorrow, and the villagers' rest station was 80 miles away from Luohua City. The journey would be full of obstacles. Ferocious beasts would probably attack them along the way. If the villagers could depart tomorrow morning, they might be able to arrive in Luohua City at night. Hence, they did not have much time. Gu Shizhou had a discussion with Di Fui about the best way forward. However, it seemed like it was best that they go separate ways. Di Fui would hunt for Chinese alligators and retrieve their spiritual stones to enter the city. Meanwhile, Gu Shizhou would bring the 12 hunters to meet the villagers and bring everyone out tomorrow morning. The 12 of them knew the strategies to find the Chinese alligators, hence, they quickly shared it to Di Fui without any delay. With these strategies and Di Fui's capabilities, it was not difficult for him to kill a few Chinese alligators in a day. Di Fui preferred to search for the Chinese alligators after sending Gu Shizhou and the 12 of them back to the village. After all, Gu Shizhou could not perform teleportation with all 12 of them. It was very risky, especially since many ferocious beasts often attack people at night. He was worried about her safety. Gu Shizhou did not manage to change his mind, hence, they followed his plan. Therefore, all of them returned to the village together. Fortunately, these 12 disciples of the Zhuiri clan were all experts, so they managed to stick to the schedule. Certainly, they were attacked by some ferocious beasts along the journey, but they managed to defeat them. Coupled with the assistance from Gu Shizhou and Di Fui, they had a generally smooth journey. The oldest disciple of the Zhuiri clan, also known as Zhao Fengxing, was a very passionate, helpful, and loyal person. While journeying together, he sighed. I cannot believe that you were trapped in the forest. Honestly, I heard that the beasts are more ferocious as you go deeper into the forest. There are also many vicious monsters. A number of experts did not even return since they entered the forest. There were about 12 to 13 miles to go when Zhao Fengxing said that. Gu Shizhou was not too pleased with what she had heard. Coincidentally, right after he finished talking, black smoke rose from the ground in the distance. Also, the temperature of the surrounding immediately turned chilly. They could see a shadow in the size of a small hill behind the smoke. Someone screamed, "Gosh! It is carrying 2 lanterns. Has it turned into a fairy?" Gu Shizhou quickly drew her sword. How does it look like lanterns? It is the eyes of a monster. Suddenly, Di Fui shouted, "Run! Now!" When he finished shouting, the dark shadow suddenly exploded and spread all over the place. It turned into more than 10 beams of black smoke that were aimed at the group. Gu Shizhou managed to see it more clearly now. She realized that it was not just one monster but hundreds of flying monsters. It looked like an insect, but its size was definitely much larger. Each of them was as big as a man with a pair of shiny sickles. Gu Shizhou did not know its name, but she was definitely concerned. They might be able to win the battle if there were only 3 to 5 of them, however, there were a few hundred. Chapter 2171, Return to the City, Let's Run Then. Gu Shizhou was leading the group while the 12 of them were in the middle, Di Fui was right behind them. The 12 of them had used all their energy to run. Fortunately, they were running at a very high speed, hence, the bugs did not catch them. However, those monsters were extremely stubborn and did not stop chasing after them. Suddenly, Gu Shizhou stopped when she saw a cave in the distance. The rest station was just around the corner, and there were many young kids and old folks there. She could not imagine the consequences if they lured the monsters along. Therefore, she turned around as she grabbed her sword tightly. She was going to fight and kill as many monsters as she could. Before she managed to open her mouth, she realized that the wave of dark shadows paused behind them. To their surprise, the monsters stopped chasing them and only circled at the same spot, making an irritating noise. Countless of red eyes stared at Gu Shizhou and the group. However, they did not dare to move forward as though there was a taboo. A moment later, the monsters gathered and formed a big pile of black smoke again and retreated. In just a blink of an eye, there was no sign of them at all. Everyone was sweating from the run, but they finally could heave a sigh of relief. It was indeed a surprise that they managed to escape a fierce battle in such an easy way. There were many wild animals in the forest that had been eaten alive by the bugs. Terrifyingly enough, many of their skeletons were still in a running or fighting posture when the locusts bit them. Looks like there is something the monsters fear about in the cave. Zhao Fengxing wiped away his sweat on his forehead. Gu Shizhou suddenly thought about the red mist in the valley. Perhaps, the monsters were afraid of the creature. She was surprised that the rest station was an unknown safe house. Thus, it might be a good place for them to settle down if they could not enter the city. However, that was not her primary plan. Although the rest station was free from the bugs, there was no cover or shade. The villagers had nowhere to hide when the blood rainfall comes, hence, they had to go to the city. Gu Shijiu and the group finally passed through the cave and saw the villagers. Before Gu Shijiu had left the village earlier, she instructed the villagers not to leave the rest station despite their curiosity. The patriarch managed to keep them all at bay. Only Tai Dan and Tai Nyo were anxiously keeping their eyes on the entrance and finally heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Gu Shijiu return. Gu Shijiu brought the 12 of them to see the patriarch, and everyone was generally very happy. Since 12 more people were joining the team, they had higher hopes of making it to the city. The next morning, everyone began to leave the rest station after sunrise to depart to Luohua City according to Gu Zijia's plan. The number of monsters was indeed lesser during the day, coupled with the protection from so many experts, all the ferocious beasts were easily defeated. Finally, they have arrived at Luohua City during sunset. As the villagers looked at the high green wall at the entrance and the soldiers that surrounded it, they cried and shed their tears of joy. Males and females below 30 years old are allowed to enter the city. We are sorry, but for the adults above 30 years old, Luohua City does not have extra food for incapable people. That was what the guards said with an icy tone, as if pushing the villagers who have struggled to come here into the hell. Luohua City was secured with a circle of very tall walls. The gate was made of solid metals, which made it exceptionally strong. The metals would remain rust-free even after years of exposure to the air. Moreover, it had the ability to work like a magnet to attract all the weapons of the intruders. Both sides of the gate were tightly sealed at the moment. There was only a small entrance visible in the corner, only one person could enter at a time. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates, better experience. Please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. There was a wide and deep river surrounding the city walls. Instead of being a moat filled with water, it contained fiery red molten lava that would melt the skin and bones of anyone who unfortunately fell into the river. When Gu Zijia's group approached the city wall, it was already late in the evening, and the place was getting dark very rapidly. Right behind them, wild beasts were growling loudly as the night started to fall upon them. On top of the walls, guards were looking down at them from above, as if looking at a group of beggars. Go! Go! Leave! Our city will only accept people with great strength or special ability. Beggars are not welcomed here. You should leave now. The clan leader was not ready to give up. He took 2 courageous steps forward and said, "Sir, with all due respect, we used to be the citizens of Luohua City. However, we were trapped in the outskirts due to some unfortunate incident. We are simply returning now. I do not care who you are. If you wish to enter, you must have the spiritual crystals. 1 crystal for every 20 entries, not a stone less." The unscrupulous guards tempted to harass these villagers with ragged clothes. They also did not believe that these people would be able to offer any spiritual crystals. Indeed, the clan leader had nothing to offer. Di Fui was still out there hunting. Last night, after making sure that Gu Shijiu and the rest of the people were in safe hands, he left promptly after a short rest. All alone, he ventured into the dangerous land to obtain the spiritual crystals. This morning, Gu Shijiu started escorting the villagers. About 10 miles away from the city, they realized that there were fewer greens. The more they approached the city, the milder the beasts they encountered. Hence, there was barely any danger left in the journey. There were many experts, Zhao Fengxing, for example, to secure the perimeter. Gu Shijiu was worried for Di Fui, for it was already late in the evening and he had yet to return, so she gave the villagers a few reminders and left to search for her man. Therefore, the clan leader was the one who took the lead at the moment. Zhao Fengxing was at the back of the troop, initially. Upon hearing the fuss at the walls, he stepped forward and looked up confidently at the guards. "Don't worry, we will present the spiritual crystals to you, not one less." Zhao Fengxing had seen the way Di Fui and Gu Shijiu fought in battles, so he was confident about their return with the crystals. The guard at the city gate recognized Zhao Fengxing. He had been here at the gate with his men a few days ago. The guard gave him a suspicious look and started judging. When did you start mixing around with these beggars? Are you trying to use these beggars to gain our sympathy to let you into the city because you have failed to obtain the spiritual crystals? Let me tell you, there is no chance at all. Zhao Fengxing refused to argue with these arrogant guards. He retrieved a red crystal from his bag. We already have one. The glistening red stone shone with great luster. The guard took a careful look at the crystal and said, "All right, you are capable. All 12 of you may enter, but not the rest of the group. Didn't you say that one stone could permit the entry of 20 people?" Zhao Fengxing questioned. Right, you can pick 8 people from this group of beggars to come in with you. Zhao Fengxing heaved a sigh of relief before selecting 20 women and children to enter the city. These people were generally weaker, so they eagerly needed a place to rest after a long, dreadful day of travel. Chapter 2173, A Group of Beggars, 2. Surprisingly, the guard went against his words after seeing the selection of the first 20 people. Even with the spiritual crystal, only the adults within the permitted age range can enter. All men below the age of 50 and women below the age of 30 are allowed to come. The elders and the children below 12 years of age are not welcome. The city has no place for useless people, the guards started insulting them. The people were startled by his hurtful demand. Out of all the people there, about half the troop was in the permitted range. There were about 30 women above 30 years of age and 30 children below 12 years of age. These people were either the parents of the strong, eligible men or their children. If abandoned, they would have no chance of survival. Soon, some people started sobbing helplessly. Some of the elders were furious. The children held on tightly to their parents' clothes, as they were too afraid to be abandoned. Meanwhile, the clan leader was obviously infuriated. What kind of rule is this? How can you be so ruthless to these innocent people? Where is the governor of the city? I want to meet the governor. The guard gave him a laugh. Our governor is a man of nobility. A beggar like you is not entitled to meet someone as noble as him. The guard then demanded impatiently, are you going to come into the city? Make your decision now. The gate will be completely closed in an hour. You will not be able to enter, even if you change your mind. Zhao Fengxing looked up and saw the signs of red clouds emerging amidst the darkness. As soon as these red clouds gathered, the rain of blood would fall. The rainwater was not corrosive like acids that could erode anything once touched. Instead, it was more like a disease. A droplet would cause the skin to rot. The worst part was that it was incurable. The only way to avoid contact was to hide in a deep cave. Furthermore, it is preferable that each individual still shield their bodies with a layer of enchanted animal skin to be completely safe from the rain. Zhao Fengxing predicted that the blood rain would start pouring in an hour. He could not help but look into the distant woods and wonder why the duo had not shown up. If they were here, they would probably figure something out. Fortunately for the villagers, Zhao Fengxing was someone with personal loyalty for his friends. After a brief discussion with his junior apprentices, they announced proudly, we will either go or stay behind together with these villagers. We will not enter the city at the moment. I am the son of the governor, Hua Zhichuan. About a century ago, I left to hunt with a group of friends, and we were unfortunately trapped in the depths of the valley. These people are the descendants of my friends. If you tell the governor about my identity, I believe that he will let us in. The clan leader finally uncovered his family background. He could tell that these men from the city were well equipped with spiritual power. With the support of spiritual power, one's lifespan could be greatly increased. As the governor of the city, his father used to have his spiritual power at level 7, who happened to be the man with the greatest power in the city at the time. He was expected to live up to 500 years. Before Hua Zhichuan left the city, the old governor was only 50 years old. His father would be 180 years old by now, so he should be around and was most probably the present governor of the city. His father loved him very much as a child. If he knew about the return of his beloved son, he would definitely let everyone else in. Nonetheless, the guard gave him a sarcastic reply, "I do not care if you are called Hua Jichuan or Yi Jichuan. I have never heard of any of your names." He gave Hua Jichuan another judgmental look before adding another scornful remark, "From your old and shady look, I think you are more than 100 years old. Our governor is a young man at the peak of his youth. How can he possibly have a son as old as you? If you want to lie, you have to lie properly. Moreover, our governor's surname is not Hua." Chapter 2174, A Group of Beggars, 3, Hua Jichuan was shocked. "Isn't the governor Hua Fengshu?" Hua Fengshu was his father's name. "Of course not. Let me tell you. The name of our governor is Yi Huiling, also known as Governor Yi." Hua Jichuan could not process the name of that complete stranger. In fact, he had never heard of him. He did not know that someone else replaced the governor of the city. What about his father, then? Where is the old governor, Hua Fengshu? Hua Jichuan needed to find out. The guard rolled his eyes in impatience and said, "How would I know? He is probably long dead. I have been here for more than 80 years, and I have never heard about Hua Fengshu." Hua Zikan's face darkened. Perhaps his father was already long gone. Hua Fengshu used to be the pride of the entire city. Everyone knew about him and treated him with respect as if he were a savior to the people. He never knew that his father would end up long gone. Hua Jichuan was obviously devastated by the sudden news. He stood, trembling. Chun Chao quickly supported him to make sure he stood steadily. Annoyed, she took a look at the men on top of the walls. "Clan leader, why don't we fight our way in? We cannot abandon our uncles, our aunts, our grandparents, and our children," she suggested in a hoarse voice. Hua Jichuan observed the men from below and shook his head in disapproval. "We shall not fight. There are weapons everywhere along the wall. Once triggered, the arrows will be released." There were many secret openings along the walls, and there was one archer behind every opening with his bow and arrows ready. Moreover, they had not let the bridge down to connect them across the river. There was no way they could fight their way in. The guards on the city wall were brutal. Hua Jichuan and his men tried to negotiate politely with them but to no avail. Instead, they became more and more impatient. "I am not interested in this discussion whatsoever. Leave. Leave now. If I hear another word, I shall release the arrows." Swiftly, many arrows could be seen aiming at them from the secret openings. The tip of the arrows was dark blue, indicating that it was obviously poisoned. Under the circumstance, the villagers dared not move. Zhao Fengxing and his men decided to keep their grounds, too. Minutes ticked by. Soon, 15 minutes had passed. Di Fui and Gu Shijiu were still nowhere to be seen. The villagers were starting to worry. They did not know how long they were going to wait for their return. Just when they were anxiously waiting, they heard someone running toward them from the woods. In the blink of an eye, they saw about 20 men running through clouds of dust. Not far behind, hundreds of wild animals that looked somewhat mutated were also running toward them. There were lions, tigers, and bears. These wild animals were double the size of how they usually were and charged with great ferocity. Their speed was unusually fast, causing gusts of wind along their way. "We have the spiritual crystals. Open the gate. Open it now." The leader shouted out loud to the men on top while raising the red crystals in the air to prove his words. These men had obviously been through a tough time to obtain the spiritual crystals. Many of them were injured with bloodstains all over their clothes. The guards could see the crystal clearly. With a wave, he commanded for the release of the bridge. While the bridge was slowly dropping, the wild animals were already in close proximity. Fortunately, the 20 men had good kung fu. Before the bridge was fully released, they took a leap into the air and landed on the bridge. Quickly, they ran towards the city. Chapter 2175, a group of beggars. 4. The wild animals knew that they could not reach the 20 men, so they decided to change targets. Instantly, they lunged towards the helpless villagers that waited for their entry at the gate. The villagers were scattered. While waiting, some decided to stand, others took their seats. Upon seeing the beasts approaching, they panicked. The beasts were smart enough to tell which ones were the weaker ones. Therefore, most of the beasts chose to attack women and children. Tai Dan, Tai Nyo, and their men were eager to save their family from the attack, so they fought the beasts to the best of their abilities to keep them away. Nonetheless, they were obviously outnumbered by the abundance of ferocious beasts surrounding them. Even with the help of Zhao Fengxing and his men, they were not able to keep everyone safe. The villagers were in a frenzied state to stay alive. The children were crying, the adults were screaming for help. It was complete chaos. Some were too nervous to care about which way to run. They ran towards the suspension bridge that was still slowly moving down. "You are not allowed on the bridge." A voice came from the top of the walls. Instantly, the guard commanded the release of an arrow, and it almost hit the foot of the first man. "I will kill anyone who steps foot on the bridge." The command of the guard was very alarming. Apparently, they were not willing to give in. After the entry of the 20 men with the spiritual crystal, the guard raised the bridge back up. Upon seeing their hope slowly disappear, the villagers grew even more anxious. The array formation. "Get back into formation." Zhao Fengxing was the only one with a clear mind at the time. The villagers recalled the array formation that they used during their escape from the valley and quickly scrambled back into formation. Unfortunately, since they were being attacked, it was difficult for them to do so. Zhao Fengxing and his men managed to slaughter a few beasts, but they were incapable of killing all of them. Helplessly, Zhao Fengxing watched as a lion pushed a child onto the ground and was about to dig its teeth into the child's throat. The adults around the child were busy fighting off the beasts, so none of them was able to rescue the child in time. Before the lion took its first bite, a shadow quickly flashed by and gave the lion a hard kick. The lion must have weighed a ton, but its heavy body floated in the air for a while before crashing into another tiger. Both hit the ground and rolled away. The child barely escaped death, so he was still suffering from shock. Astonished, he then started crying out loud. "Brother Stone! Brother Stone!" Hope returned to the villagers. Their eyes glistened with happy tears. "Stone! Brother Stone! Brother Stone, you are finally back." The rescuer who just emerged was Gu Shijiu, but she was not alone. Di Fui was back, too. However, he was fighting another beast at the moment. There was no time for chatter, so Gu Shijiu made a few swift teleportations and started killing the beasts with the sword in her hand. They worked together perfectly and took down the beasts at every opportunity. The bodies of the slaughtered beasts lay motionless wherever they moved. Almost instantaneously, the beasts were beheaded. In a brief moment, more than half of the beasts were slaughtered. The rest of the beasts knew that the situation was not getting any better for them, so they left frantically. The duo's kung fu was extraordinarily good that even the guards on the wall were impressed. Everyone applauded for Gu Shijiu and Di Fui as the beasts made their escape. The villagers also celebrated their survival. Chapter 2176, Entry into the City. Di Fui raised his hand to release 7 spiritual crystals into the air. They floated in a straight line and shone with sparkling light. He looked at the guards at the top of the wall and demanded, "Here are the spiritual crystals. Open the gate." It was the first time that the guards had seen so many spiritual crystals at once. The leader hesitated a little out of jealousy, but he still had to hold on to the same principle. Zhao Fengxing explained the situation to the duo. While he was explaining, many eyes focused intensely on Gu Shijiu, as they were hopeful that her presence would change the situation for the better. Frowningly, Gu Shijiu looked up into the sky and realized that the rain of blood would fall in half an hour. These people needed to enter the city as quickly as possible. She had made a promise to the deceased elders to make sure that everyone would arrive safely in Luohua City. After a moment of consideration, she took out a huge red crystal from her sleeve. It was 2 times bigger than the size of the ordinary crystals. If the red crystals were third-class gems, this one belonged in the second class. It was very rare to come across this size of crystal. One such crystal was equivalent to 3 ordinary ones. She showed the crystal proudly. I would like to offer you another second-class gem, in exchange for shelter for all of us. The guard fixed his eyes on the red crystal. He knew the type of gem very well. Hesitantly, he answered, I cannot do so. I did not set the rule. The governor made it. I dare not do as I please. Please invite the governor. I would like to have a word. The guard smirked. Lady, our governor will not simply see anyone. It is not easy for you to meet him. Unless, what? Di Fui interrupted coldly, and the guard was taken by surprise. The city guard was used to acting arrogantly. He was not highly positioned, but he bore an important responsibility. Everyone who entered or left the city must act according to his conditions. The people had to ingratiate with him in order to have a smooth journey. He was not afraid of anyone, except for a few members of the city's noble people. He gave Di Fui a lewd expression. The governor has always been very considerate to beautiful women. The lady here is obviously very attractive. If she agreed to spend a night with the governor, he would probably, before he could finish, a hard slap in his face stopped him from making any offensive remarks. The figure of a man flashed before his eyes and slapped him so hard that he hit the floor. It could have easily sent him down the wall. The intruder obviously did not hold back his strength. Hence, the guard was caught in a daze after the slap. Dizzy, with his eyes blurred, all he could hear was a buzzing in his ears. Then, blood started oozing out from the corners of his mouth. The guard was surrounded by many of his men, but no one noticed the attacker. When they finally realized it, the guard was already in a daze. They had never expected that someone was brave enough to attack their leader. Driven by a sense of anxiety and indignation, they started surrounding the man in a defensive manner. The man raised his arm and put a sword across the guard's neck. What were you saying? Would you like to repeat? The voice of the man was soft as if conversing, but the guard was overwhelmed in insecurities from the icy tone of his voice. He had to surrender under the pressure of the sword on his neck. He tried very hard to focus on the appearance of the intruder. The man was in purple robes, with his face concealed under a mask. The guard could only see the man's dark eyes through the holes. At this very moment, his eyes were bent, as if smiling. The guard was expecting the intruder to be glaring at him with a serious face. Instead, the man gave him a warm smile in return. The sword was still hanging on the guard's neck, however. Slowly, but surely, he started to feel the sword cutting through his flesh. The skin on his neck was slashed open, and blood emerged. As seconds passed, the pain became more and more unbearable. The whole process was as though someone was cutting meat with a blunt knife. It was slow but surely painful and frightening. The guards were shocked to the core. Their leader was in the hands of the intruder, so his followers dared not take another step forward. Don't you do anything to him, they verbally warned. The guard is the cousin of the governor. If he is hurt, your life will not be spared. Let him go. Release him now. The shouting continued. The guard was trembling in fear, but he still refused to keep his voice down. I bet that you dare not do anything to me. Suddenly, he could not continue speaking. The sword buried another inch deeper into his neck. With the slightest movement in the right direction, the man's aorta would be slashed open. By then, his life would be surely gone. What do you want? The guards finally gave in. Open the gate and let everyone through, Di Fui answered slowly. The guard's face was as pale as a sheet, but he decided to give his one last try. I cannot do so. You see. Can you see the archers at the wall? If you do not let me go, they will kill everyone down there. A few moments ago, he gave the archers a secret code to signal them. The archers responded immediately and were all in their respective positions. All their bows were armed with arrows. With a wave, the archers would release their arrows and kill every life on the ground. These archers were the best of the best in the city. Their precision and accuracy were, without a doubt, the best. The innocent villagers who did not have any armor were easy targets for them. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates, better experience. Please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. Di Fui took a look at the bows of the archers and gave the guard another delightful smile. Take a look at your so-called archers. Are there any arrows on their bows now? The guard and his men were caught by surprise. Di Fui gave the guard a hand to help him turn around and observe the archers that he was so proud of. After a quick look, his expression changed instantly. A shadow had passed each and every archer. Everywhere the shadow was, a cry of horror burst forth. Soon, all the arrows were taken away. The shadow that stole their arrows moved too quickly for the archers to react. They could not even see the figure properly. The one who stole their arrows was certainly Gu Shijiu. At this moment, she was standing casually on the edge of the wall, with a bundle of steel arrows in her hands. Let the people in, she demanded authoritatively. The guard was finally concerned about his safety. I will now send someone to notify the governor. If he agrees, I will let these people in at once. Gu Shijiu observed the sky and realized that the downpour of the blood rain would occur in less than 15 minutes. The act of notifying the governor was only a waste of time. There was not enough time for his man to go to and fro. The guard was obviously trying to waste their time. Did he take the lives of the innocent as a joke? Di Fui gave him another smile and started putting more pressure on the sword. You can either open the gate now or get killed immediately before I open the gate myself. Which one would you choose? I am not in the mood for this conversation. On the count of 3, if you have not decided, I will decide for you. 1, 2, let them in. Let them in. Release the suspension bridge. The guard could not win the argument, so he quickly gave the orders to his men. The bridge was once again released, and the gates were wide open. More than 100 villagers ran across the bridge to enter the city as their refuge. After the entry of the villagers into the city, there were only 5 minutes left before the downpour. Di Fui kept his sword and tapped the guard on his shoulder with the back of his blade. Do not attempt to mess this up. Otherwise, I will give you a hard time. The intruder was too unpredictable, so there was no way one could guard against him. The guard could not care less about these people at the moment. He quickly commanded, close the gates. Open up the protective shelter. Now. The soldiers on the wall were well trained. Quickly, they fell back into their positions and started carrying out their duties. The bridge was raised, and the gates were shut. Some soldiers took control of some secret mechanisms to unleash a beam of white light that soon spread out like fleeting clouds. The scattered light started to move towards the city center to shield the entire area. A few moments later, light from varying directions covered up the entire city in a dome shield. Soon after the formation of the light dome, drops of blood rain that were as big as the size of a coin started pouring down. The rain hit the wizardry barrier in the shape of a light dome and slipped off its surface like an umbrella. Traces of blood were left behind, making the shield look somewhat terrifying. When the raindrops fell on the shield, the cracking sound was grating on the ear. Also, the dome shook unsteadily as a result of the downpour. It was a worrying sight. The villagers had just entered the city and were given the opportunity to witness the occurrence, so they all stood to gaze at the sky. Gu Shijiu was busy observing her surroundings. She found the city rather odd. The buildings were mostly in the shape of a Mongolian yurt with wedge-shaped structures. The sizes of the yurts varied. Along the streets, there were shops. Generally, the buildings were quite glamorous. Different shops supplied different needs, for example, weapons, clothing, and daily necessities. Most of the shops that could be found anywhere else in the mortal world were present. Due to the odd appearance of the outsiders, many citizens filled the streets just to satisfy their curiosity. However, Gu Shijiu also realized that these citizens did not dress very well. Most of the people had very ordinary garments made of coarse clothes, unlike the clan leader's description of the city, where more than half of the people could afford to dress glamorously and ride in the best carriages. What she saw appeared to be the exact opposite. He said that the people in the city lived and worked in peace and contentment. The people here, however, did not seem to lead a very good life. Most of the people looked tired, and their hands looked rough. Certainly, there were some rich men, too, like the owners of the shops. Most of them were covered in silk and satin. Their faces had a healthy glow. Gu Shijiu was observant enough to see that all these bosses seemed to be dressing up in the same style as if they were working for another superior leader. A few beautiful women who were finely dressed surrounded these men. Some dressed up quite ordinarily but were attractive enough to catch the men's attention. The women did not look very comfortable, though. There was a sense of terror in their eyes, like a group of frightened, helpless deer. Gu Shijiu watched as a woman stepped carelessly onto one of the men's foot and was kicked harshly away. The woman did not even voice a sound. Unsteadily, she picked herself up and bowed before the man while knocking her head onto the solid ground to ask for his forgiveness. The man gave her another kick and demanded, "Go away." The woman hit the ground again with her head but was too scared to stand. She crawled and begged in a trembling voice. "Please. Please don't send me away." Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates, better experience. Please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. The bossy man gave her a hiss before raising his foot to the woman. "Use your face to clean up the dirt." The woman was surprised, but she did it anyway. Still trembling, she obeyed his order and started cleaning the dirt on his shoes with one side of her cheek. Soon, her soft face was covered in different streaks of dust and dirt. Chapter 2179, The Arrival of the Governor. The man finally forgave her. He then threw a handkerchief at her and demanded, "Lousy woman, you'd better clean up your face." What a disgusting look. Gu Shijiu could not contain her anger. Her fingers clenched in frustration, and she was ready to confront the rude man. The woman beside Gu Shijiu quickly stopped her and warned, "Lady, stay out of trouble. These bosses are the men of the governor. If you get yourself involved in things that you should not be involved, you will be sent out of the city." Death was the only outcome if anyone was sent out of the city. Therefore, the people here chose to endure hardship even in the worst conditions. Gu Shijiu took another look at life in the city. There were blacksmiths forging irons tirelessly. In the small building next to the workshops, some were busy weaving them. These workers dressed in the simplest way. They worked hard with their heads down while focusing completely on their work. Along the streets, soldiers patrolled the area every now and then. The segregation of their social statuses could be told apart based solely on the way the people dressed. The workers were the people of the lowest status in society. On the other hand, the soldiers were a class higher than the common people. Meanwhile, the leaders of the soldiers were in the upper class while their bosses were in the special upper class. The guard had suffered a great loss in pride under Di Fui's life-threatening sword. He wanted to take his revenge, but unfortunately, Di Fui fed him with a pill before releasing him and warned him not to do anything reckless, otherwise, he would have to suffer another painful lesson. The wound on the guard's neck required immediate medical attention, so revenge was not his priority. After giving commands to protect the city, he quickly left to treat his wound. Instead of having to handle the leader of the guards, the newcomers were greeted by another group of people. "Newcomers can come here to register yourselves." Some people started shouting in the streets. Soon, hundreds of soldiers emerged from the domed buildings behind the shops. They started surrounding the newcomers in a circle. Di Fui was astonished by these soldiers' spiritual power. He could tell from their appearance that their spiritual power was actually quite strong, at least at level 3 and above. The strongest one was the leader, who was already at level 4.5. The junior apprentices of Zhao Fengxing were at level 3 or so. Only Zhao Fengxing's spiritual power was more advanced. He was already at level 4. In the upper bound, these soldiers would not even be qualified to be servants. However, in the Shura world, where spiritual power was scarce, these men's spiritual power was considered as extraordinary. These soldiers pushed the newcomers forcefully into one of the yards, like herdsmen leading their animals into the stalls. Go! Go in there. Do as you are instructed. The lady who gave Gu Shizhou a word of advice back then was actually a cleaner who looked like a woman in her 40s. After a brief exchange, Gu Shizhou was surprised to learn that she was only 24 years old. From the lady, Gu Shizhou found out more about the general life in the city. Basically, the governor was the most powerful man in the city with many men of great strengths to help him keep the city in order. Every newcomer would be required to pass a kung fu test. Those who were capable would be assigned to be the governor's followers. These qualified men would be gifted with the company of very beautiful women, glamorous houses, and scrumptious food. As long as they swore their loyalty to the governor, they could have whatever they asked for. The average ones would be assigned to be the soldiers. Their lives, at least, would be free from the concern of food and clothing. On the other hand, normal people would be enslaved and put into different corners. They had to work all day and night. Those who disobeyed them would be punished and die in exile. As for the women, they were the people of the lowest class in society. They would be assigned to different places and become either the concubines or servants of the rich. Their fate depended largely on their physical appearance. The unattractive women would be put in the brothels as prostitutes to provide free services for the soldiers. Any resistance would cost these women the price of either being scolded or being beaten to death publicly while naked. As expected, Gu Shizhou was infuriated by the news announcing the arrival of the governor. A loud announcement came from afar. Soon, the people got onto their knees and bowed before him. Gu Shizhou and Di Fui did not kneel, hence, the clan leader and the villagers followed their example. Zhao Fengxing pondered for a moment and decided to stop his junior apprentices from kneeling as well. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates, better experience please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. The governor showed up in the most dramatic way that he possibly could. First of all, a light blue ship started sailing through the air in the sky above the city. There was no paddle to propel the body of the ship forward. Instead, it moved across by swinging 2 giant, wooden wings in the air. 4 young men were standing on the ship. All of them looked very handsome. The young men were seemingly protecting a man in purple robes. The man in purple robes was sitting at a white jade table. There was a set of chess pieces in front of him. With a chess piece in his hand, he looked like he was trying to win the game. Surrounding the ship were 8 celestial cranes, each carrying a lady in a white dress with her face covered under a veil. Some of these ladies were carrying layers of fine gauze in their hands. Others carried flower baskets to spread colorful petals along the way. The flowery scent filled the air long before the ship arrived. Gu Shizhou was astonished. In a strange way, she somehow felt that it was a scene that she had witnessed some time before. The experience had definitely left an unforgettable impression on her. She fixed her eyes at the man in purple robes. Due to the distance, she could not really see his face with his head lowered. In a blur, she could only see a glistening red gem hanging somewhere on his head. Her heart started thumping in nervousness. Suddenly, someone caught her hand in a tight grasp. She turned around and met Di Fui's pitch-black eyes. He looked at her with a tight smile before directing an audio message to her. Is he really that good-looking? Are you mesmerized? He was clearly jealous. His act of jealousy came as a heartwarming gesture to Gu Shizhou. She leaned closer and responded, I feel that the scene is somewhat familiar to me. Di Fui squinted his eyes. He, too, felt that everything about the ship looked familiar, but he also found it uncomfortable to look at, like the entire scenario was actually an impersonation. The ship approached quickly and was already in the sky above the city. The ladies on the cranes waved their hands to release a roll of pale purple gauze from above. The soft fabric danced gracefully in the wind before reaching the ground. There, it served as a bridge between the ship and the land. The 4 young men quickly traveled down and landed on the ground. They kneeled before the ship. Welcome the arrival of Governor. The rest of the people followed. Welcome the arrival of Governor. The greeting ceremony was rather impressive. Along the streets, people were all kneeled. Only Gu Shijiu and her group were still standing, thus, creating a strong contrast. Some soldier approached them and commanded hoarsely, "Why don't you kneel before the governor to welcome his arrival?" Gu Shijiu gave him a nonchalant reply, "Is there any rule that says that I must kneel to greet the arrival of the governor?" The soldier was speechless. Such a rule did not exist. What they did was a mere custom that was practiced over the years in society. Gu Shijiu possessed a composure that was intimidating to others. Moreover, the soldier had seen how she and Di Fui fought against the ferocious beasts, so he was well aware that she could easily take his life. Her question left him speechless, for he was concerned that she would kill him. Before the soldier could ask anything more, a voice came from the ship above them. "It is fine. I sympathize with their tragedies. Moreover, they are newcomers, so there is no need for them to follow the customs of Luohua City." His voice was magnetic, but his words sounded unnatural as if carrying a fake accent. Gu Shijiu had a strong dislike for it. The spiritual level of this man is already at level 9, so we shall not act impulsively. There are many things about the city that are not right, so we need time to investigate the matters. "Baby, you have to be patient," Di Fui directed an audio to her. Chapter 2181, the show was overly dramatic. Gu Shijiu did not know what to say. Di Fui kept referring to her as his baby. However, she was also well aware that the man had many weird but practical ideas. Unlike her, the things that she could remember were limited to the events that she had been through over the past 6 months and nothing more. Hence, she thought that she should listen to him more often. Thus, she agreed with him. Nonetheless, she had to tell him how the man in the fluttering robes made her feel. "I do not know why, but I do not like him very much." She found him a little annoying, yet in a familiar fashion. She tried hard to suppress her impulse to take the man down and give him a hard punch. What a coincidence. I do not like him very much either. "Baby, you and I are really meant to be together, even our thoughts are in sync," Di Fui answered with a delightful smile. Meanwhile, he could not help but pinch her palm gently. "You and your sweet talking." Gu Shijiu made fun of him, when in fact she enjoyed his attention. She also thought that they were very compatible. She then fixed her eyes on their hands that were interlocked in a tight grip. It was heartwarming, like they had been doing this for many years. She would very much like to hold his hand for the rest of their lives. Therefore, they held their hands and watched the man as he continued to make his grand entrance. The man on the ship finally stood up. With a leap, he slid down the stripe that was waving in the wind. His purple robes were loose, so the soft fabrics danced in the air as he slowly made his way down, like a flag ruffling in the breeze. He looked somewhat elegant and unconventional. In the blink of an eye, he landed safely. However, instead of landing on the ground, he decided to step onto the backs of the 4 young men, who were still kneeling with their heads down. Gu Shijiu could finally see the man's face clearly and was surprised. The man had a handsome face with delicate features. His eyebrows were shaped in a perfect arch, complementing his big, bright eyes. He had an attractive smile on his face, and his skin was soft and supple, fairer than any man should possibly be. On his forehead, he was wearing a headband in the shape of a fox's eye. His was as beautiful as a lady, in fact. There was a soft feminine quality in his appearance. The man was the governor, also known as Yiling. After he landed, the 8 ladies subsequently got down from the floating ship. Quickly, they covered the ground with the petals before he stepped forward. Soon, all these ladies lay on the ground one by one, forming a line. Their white dresses formed a very strong contrast to the purple petals that glittered the land. From the back of the 4 young men, he took a step forward and stepped on the leg of the first lady in white. He slowly continued and stepped over her entire body. He then stepped onto the second lady, and the process continued. Gu Shijiu was speechless. The show was overly dramatic. He did not respect these people at all. Despite her frustration, Gu Shijiu still had a feeling that the governor was actually an impersonation of someone else with the same purple robes and fox eye headband. She was too sure that she knew the man. Yi Ling walked slowly towards the duo and stopped about 2 meters away from them. Suspiciously, he stared at them before questioning their identity. Are you the leaders of the villagers? I am one of the villagers, Gu Shijiu answered in an icy tone. Yi Ling gave her a half-smile and said, you certainly do not look like one. Your appearance is clearly different from them. He then took another look at Di Fui and asked, who is this? My fiancé, Gu Shijiu answered him loudly and clearly. Yi Ling squinted his eyes in disbelief. He observed Di Fui thoroughly and was offended. Di Fui only stood casually, but the man seemed to possess a greater aura than he did, even in a casual posture. Chapter 2182, A warning to others. The stranger intimidated him. Governor, the city guards suddenly emerged and greeted him. He kneeled and bowed before Yi Ling again. Governor, you have to help me, he pleaded with eyes full of sympathy. Yi Ling was obviously puzzled. What is the problem? The guard immediately pointed at Gu Shijiu and Di Fui and said, they are the ones. I was doing my duties according to the laws of Luohua City and forbade entry of the elders, the women, and the children. However, they decided to threaten me. He put a sword on my neck to make me open the gate. It almost cost my life. He then showed the bandage on his neck. The bandage was stained with blood and was quite a horrible sight. Yi Ling turned to look at the rest of the soldiers from the wall and questioned them. Is what he said true? The soldiers dared not tell any lies, so they all agreed. An eloquent man among the soldiers even described the entire scenario vividly to let the governor know what had really happened. Yi Ling listened attentively with a smile and never interrupted. When the man was finally done, he let out a sigh. Now, I know what happened. He gave the leader of the guards a wave and told him to come forward. Come here. Let me look at your wound. The guard approached him in a panic and quickly revealed the wound under the bandage. The wound was a sight of gore. Governor, please take a look at this. Indeed, the wound is quite severe, there was a sympathetic tone in the governor's voice. Exactly. Exactly. Governor, please take revenge for me. On behalf of your cousin. The guard clenched his fist in indignation. Meanwhile, he gave Di Fui and Gu Shijiu a look to show his satisfaction about the consequences that they were about to face. Gu Shijiu avoided eye contact, but she was still worried. The people around the governor all possessed great kung fu, even the worst one was at level 6. As a result of the governor's arrival, many soldiers had to secure the perimeter around him as a safety precaution. There were thousands of men standing quietly, just waiting for an order. Gu Shijiu and the rest of the villagers were surrounded. If it were only Di Fui and Gu Shijiu alone, they had absolutely nothing to worry about. In the worst-case scenario, they could just teleport. There was no chance that the soldiers could even reach them. However, they had to take care of the villagers who stood behind them. These people did not know enough kung fu to protect themselves. The helpless villagers were merely easy targets for the group of soldiers who possessed high levels of spiritual power. Gu Shijiu was concerned about the governor's motive. If he intended to harm the villagers, she would teleport along with Di Fui to hold the governor captive. She maintained her composure, but secretly, she was all prepared. If anything went slightly wrong, she would make the first move. The villagers' safety was her most significant concern at the moment. Di Fui held her hand in a tight grasp, so he could certainly tell that she was sweating in nervousness. Don't worry. The guard is about to get very unlucky, he directed an audio to her. Just relax and watch the show. Di Fui gave her a tight smile as if he already saw it coming. Yi Ling's fingers were gracefully thin with well-trimmed nails. All his nails were sharply shaped, like the nails of a woman. At this very moment, his fingers lingered across the wound on the guard's neck. The wound is deep enough to slash your aorta open, isn't it? Yes, yes, it is a near miss. The guard was still frightened. Did you let them in because your life was threatened? Yi Ling continued. Chapter 2183, A Warning to Others, 2, Yes, there was nothing I could do. We are very fortunate, Yi Ling sighed. Before the guard made any comment, he added, we are very fortunate that Miss Gu and her followers are here to seek refuge. Just imagine the consequence if they were the enemies and you opened the gate for them. Would you risk everybody else's life in the city just because your life was threatened? The guard did not know what to answer. My cousin, he stammered. Intuitively, he felt threatened and was ready to get away from Yi Ling's reach. However, Yi Ling's fingers never left his neck. He failed to escape Yi Ling's grasp. Instead, his sudden retreat allowed Yi Ling to bury his sharp nails deeply into his wound. The wound burst open, with blood flowing all over Yi Ling's fingers. However, he did not take his fingers out of the wound. Instead, he buried his nails even deeper. The guard was terrified and in pain. Panic filled his eyes. My cousin brother, please. Please spare my life on Madame Yun's behalf, he pleaded. After that, he could not speak of another word. The nails finally penetrated through the aorta on his neck and reached the airway in his throat, thus blocking air from reaching the lungs. The guard gasped for air but still could not breathe. Yi Ling took his hand back and let the guard fall to the ground. Blood flowed out of the wound continuously. He was about to die, for sure. Soon, he was dead on the ground with his eyes wide open, seemingly in disbelief that his own cousin brother would sentence him to death in such a brutal way. The soldiers were not expecting this sight of gore. They held their breaths in utter shock. There was dead silence in a plaza filled with thousands of people. Not a single sound was made. Yi Ling slowly wiped the blood away on one of the lady's dresses. He then put his fingers into the lattice mouth and demanded, clean this for me. I get dizzy when I see blood. The lady did not answer. She did as told and cleaned his finger with her mouth full of saliva. A few moments later, Yi Ling took his fingers back and observed them under the light. His nails were as clean as before without any traces of blood. He took a look at the people inside. There is no place in the city for this man, who cared for nothing but saving his own life. Although he was my beloved cousin, I had to sentence him to death for violating the law. He took another look at the dead body and shook his head in disapproval. He was, after all, my cousin. I cared for him the most, but what he did was really unexpected. I was truly heartbroken, but still, I had to uphold the importance of our laws. There was no choice for me. With his death, all his mistakes shall be redeemed. Send some men to give him a grand funeral. Yes, sir. The 4 men approached and carried the body away. Yi Ling blew his fingers dry before taking another look at the people. Remember, you may lose your life, but never your integrity. Are you clear? Yes, Governor. The law should not be taken lightly, the people answered in unison while trembling in fear. They knew how well Yi Ling used to treat the guard. If he was not afraid to severely punish someone he cared about, the rest of the people were going to be treated the same as well, if not worse. Gu Shizhou seemed impressed by what she had witnessed. Her facial expression certainly seemed to suggest so. The newcomers looked at each other, not knowing what to do. They were anxious about their safety since the governor seemed like such a ruthless man. The laws of Luohua City forbade elders, women, and children from coming into the city. After the guard's death sentence, would they be sent away for breaching the law? Chapter 2184, felt as though his eyes lurking at her like a predator. Gu Shizhou quickly looked at the sky and realized that it was still raining blood. Intuitively, she gripped her sword tightly in her hand. Lady, please do not panic. Although the laws must not be taken lightly, I was the one who made the laws. Certainly, there are ways that I can negotiate with you. Gu Shizhou was perplexed. How? Yi Ling looked at her smilingly and seductively. If you manage to get a Class 1 spiritual crystal, I will make the decision to let all of you stay. Gu Shijiu was surprised by the offer. It was certainly achievable and rather simple. With a sigh, she agreed. Okay. She and Di Fui had found a Class 1 spiritual crystal before, but they had completely absorbed its power, otherwise, she could have satisfied his request immediately. She looked up and saw Yi Ling's intense eyes staring at her. Gu Shijiu felt as though his eyes were lurking at her like a predator. She looked him straight in the eye and said, Governor, are you going to send us to hunt for the Class 1 spiritual crystal now? Of course not, Yi Ling gave her a warm smile. You can wait until the rain stops. As long as you can get the crystal back within 3 days, it is fine. You and the gentleman here look like people of great talents. I am a man who appreciates the talents of others. He flicked his finger to summon his men. Clear out the residential area around the south and let these people stay there. After all that they have been through, they must be exhausted. Yes, Governor. His men attended to his order quickly. Gu Shijiu was certainly not expecting for him to grant them a chance of survival. Perhaps, the man really did appreciate talents very much. In fact, the man was found to be less annoying than she thought he would be, so she thanked the governor for his kindness. Yi Ling gave her another gentle look in the eye and said lovingly, You are welcome, Miss Gu. Should you require my help, you can look for me at Fanghe Cottage. He turned and stepped onto the ladies' bodies to return to where the ship docked. Summon the ship, he said lazily. The ship that had been hanging around in the air approached him slowly. Yi Ling took out an umbrella and spun the handle around with his palm. The umbrella started spinning and carried him up to the ship that was floating in the air. He had a great body, so many of his actions were found to be very extraordinary to the ordinary people. They would cheer for him no matter what he did. Usually, the ladies could hardly keep their eyes off him. After he landed, he took a seat at the front and looked at the people from above. Quietly, he was trying to enjoy the ladies' attention. To his dismay, the ladies were not attracted to him this time. They were all looking at the man in purple robes standing next to Gu Shijiu. Yi Ling then took a look at his own robes that were decorated with many complex patterns. Silver threads were used to embroider the smooth patterns of a wave. On top of the wavy patterns, there was another piece of embroidery depicting the lively shape of a dragon. It was obviously of the finest quality. He chose the best embroidery to match with the best fabrics. Every time he put on his robes, he felt like a king who was overlooking his kingdom. He also thought that he was the only one who could carry the color purple. Any other man with the same purple robes looked just like a failed impersonation. Others were definitely not born with the same grace as his, so he never actually forbade the use of purple robes among the common people. If others wore the same color as him, he would still be the attractive one. To his surprise, the stranger in purple robes replaced him as the center of attention. The purple robes that the man was wearing did not showcase any complex embroidery patterns. Instead, it was merely loose and comfortable clothing. However, the man was able to carry the style very well. The color of the fabric was as bright as the beautiful tones of the dusking sky. It matched the man very well as if he was born to wear it. When Yi Ling stood before him, he felt as if an impersonation of the man. The feeling made him very uncomfortable. After all, he was the governor of the entire city. The man was totally incomparable to him. He had tried very hard to showcase his power as a governor. He thought that he had successfully outshone the man with his charm, but the current situation had proven otherwise. Carefully, he observed Di Fui with squinted eyes. An overwhelming sense of insecurity started to haunt him. If he could control the man, there was always a way to put the man to great use. If not, he would try every way to get rid of him. A sudden idea occurred to him. He leaned down from the edge of the ship and looked at the clan leader. I heard that someone claimed to be the son of the previous governor. Could that be you? The clan leader's face turned pale. Hesitantly, he answered, it was. Yi Ling gave him another smile and said, after a century, I am sure that things are not how they used to be anymore, am I right? Especially the position of the governor. Hua Zhichuan gave him another look of disappointment before agreeing to him, yes. Yi Ling was satisfied. Sarcastically, he responded with a tone of delight, regardless of your identity, I will show you some respect for the sake of Miss Gu. I now grant you the gift of the Feng Shui Temple in the southern part of the city. Hua Zhichuan did not know what to answer, so he kept silent. Finally, Yi Ling left with his ship. The sky was still pouring drops of blood. Occasionally, bloody red bats appeared to be diving from the sky and fell onto the grayish wizardry barrier before bouncing off. The sound of heavy raindrops was indeed very distracting. Find authorized novels in webnovel faster updates, better experience please click www.webnovel.com for visiting. The rain was something really normal for the people here though. Some of them had been living in the city for years, so they were not concerned about it. Their lives continued undistracted. However, for the villagers who had just escaped from the valley, it was their first time witnessing such a strange occurrence. Many of them found it very frightening. Tai Dan made his way to Gu Shijiu and asked, Brother Stone, do you think that the bats are powerful? Gu Shijiu answered him, smilingly, why don't you go out there and fight them? Tai Dan touched his nose awkwardly and kept his mouth shut. Somehow, he felt that Brother Stone had been quite sarcastic recently. She must have acquired the sarcastic trait from her fiancé. He could not help glare at Di Fui angrily. No matter where they went, the man would always walk gracefully next to Gu Shijiu. He had certainly attracted much attention from the ladies. After their arrival in the city, Tai Dan also noticed that many people were not as tanned as they were. Many citizens were quite fair-skinned, especially the people of the highest social class in the city. They dressed in exquisite clothing that complemented their light complexion. Even the complexion of the governor was very fair. People would take notice of his high position in the lap of luxury very easily. He did not know that men could actually be so fair-skinned. Moreover, the ladies seemed to prefer men with a lighter complexion. Disappointed, Tai Dan knew that the villagers were very tanned as compared to the people from the city. Along the way, the citizens looked at them as if a group of uncivilized people. He took a look at the clan leader and noticed the lack of joy from his expression. He did not seem very happy to return home. Instead, he looked concerned.